Now, I know I am a little bit behind in terms of my YouTube schedule, so the first book on my list is actually a book I read over Christmas, and that is That Valley by Melissa Broder. Now, funny enough, I did read this over Christmas, as I just mentioned. I read it while they were serving Filipino fruit salad. If you don't know what that is, give that a quick Google search, and you're welcome, because this is actually the equivalent of a Thanksgiving turkey for us Filipinos. So yeah, who knows, that just might be your thing, just in case you're into super sweet fruit salad. So if I were like to take a few words to describe this book, I would describe it as a trippy, psychedelic acid trip in the desert that explores grief. And a bit of a background about the author: if you have been chronically online as I have, then you might have already heard of Melissa Broder. You haven't? Okay, sorry. So Melissa Broder is basically behind this Twitter account called So Sad Today, which explores really cringy millennial existential topic. And there in her account, she actually posts stuff like, "Sorry, I tried to use you as an antidepressant," or "Welcome to anxiety, sponsored by depression." I know, it's Tumblr level cringe, but 12,000 people, including myself, actually liked some of her tweets and follows the account. By the way, the sun is going down, so it's a bit distracting, and like my ring light isn't working as it used to. I was supposed to film a little bit earlier, but my dog decided to shit in the room. So I had to spend like half an hour like cleaning his poop. So if you do have like the time to have a quick visit to So Sad Today, the Twitter account, you should know that her writing is totally reflected in this book. She's basically very California, like this book. If you've ever been to California or heard of California or watched anything that's set in California, I think you would know what I mean. It's very hard for me to explain or put it into words, but this book is very California, which is fitting because that valley is located in California. So basically, if like California was a book, this would be it. That Valley follows this unnamed narrator who has obviously a lot on her plate. Her father is in declining health and is in the ICU after like this terrible accident. On top of that, her husband has this mysterious illness that compromises his day-to-day life. So with so much baggage, the lady, she takes off on a journey to the most exciting place in the world, a Best Western. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic. Everyone knows a Best Western isn't the most exciting place to be. Well, except their breakfast buffet, right? The book is basically narrated between fragments of the story's present situation and, of course, the memories of her past. To continue to take off her mind through things and problems that are happening at home, she decides to take this trek into the desert. And subsequently, she comes across this cactus that, I know this is gonna sound a little bit weird, but it's all moist. And this very weird scene happens where she sticks her hand, and this sort of like kickstarts some memories of her past, wherein she sees her father as a young man. It sort of like awakens something in her. So because of this sort of euphoric experience she has with the cactus, she resolves to try and find it again. But in the process, she gets lost, and the book goes from an examination of grief into a full-on survival story. Which I know, like, without the subplot of her getting lost in the desert, we wouldn't have the entire book. I still think it was, like, plain stupid. I don't think someone even as insufferable as our main character would traverse a desert, which can get very hot, by the way, and not bring any supplies. So I really was like committed into like finishing this book, especially since it's such a short read. But I couldn't help but feel like I just wanted it to end. I mean, I do get the metaphor, like, especially since we have like a lot of long overdrawn scenes in the desert. I think that, you know, the desert itself was a metaphor for grief, sometimes feeling as cruel and as voidless as this place. Now, I've I've never been to a desert in my life, but I have watched enough like Discovery Channel and National Geographic to know that in the desert it can become really hot by day and really cold by night. So like 1 minute you're close to dying from dehydration, and the next minute you're probably close to dying from hypothermia. That's how bad the desert is. And grief, although it might not like have the same physical manifestations of what you feel in the desert, it does have that impact on you mentally. Grief is so much like the desert in a way that it is both hot and cold, and it can seem so vast and unending. And honestly, I really did like that comparison. I just wish that we had more time examining the main character's relationships around her for us to feel more empathetic about her situation. I mean, like, say for example, we get that she's a writer, but it doesn't seem like her being a writer has any significance in the book. And I mean, like, yes, she did love her husband and she did love her dad so much, but we don't really get to see any depth to that relationships. And I know that it is pretty obvious that this book is a nod to Melissa Broder's real life. In fact, she does dedicate this book to her father, and her husband, as far as what I've read in the internet, is also fighting like an autoimmune disease. That being said, I really do respect her for putting her life into words and sharing her grief and experiences with us. However, unfortunately, I did feel like the story, it just felt as dry as a desert. But, you know, the book isn't entirely bad, I will tell you that. I do have to commend Melissa Broder's style of writing. It may seem like it's vulgar and off-putting at times, but I feel like that gave a unique voice to the main character. And her examination of grief felt very real to me. Oftentimes, like, the most hurtful part of actually losing someone is the process of it, like the great before or whatever you choose to call it. Like that feeling that you're slowly losing someone, you can't do anything about it and you're totally helpless. That is so very hurtful, and I think that pain and that grief is perfectly encapsulated in this book. So yes, I'm going to give a generous 3 stars to Death Valley. Now for the second book that we are going to review, I actually have a physical copy of it, but I don't have it with me currently. Somebody borrowed it. That book is The Miracles of the Namiya General Store, which is a total opposite of Death Valley. And when I say opposite, I mean like this book was the total like in the opposite spectrum of Death Valley, where Death Valley felt a bit shallow at times and absurd and confusing, and like you're wondering what the point of this book was. This book was more sophisticated. It was a lot more clearer in terms of its structure, and the overall story had more depth and deeper meaning. I actually really like the Namiya General Store because I am a big fan of the magical realism genre, and it really explored the theme very well while still being grounded in reality. So the story starts with like 3 delinquents who are on the run. They are currently on high because they just committed a robbery and decide to hide it out for the night until the coast is clear. And like straight off the bat, things out of the ordinary start to happen. It starts with like a letter which drops into the store while our delinquents are inside the store, and there's no one in sight that could have dropped that in. The letter happens to be addressed to the Namiya General Store itself. Like, think of it like a Dear Dolly letter. So one of the boys decides to take it upon himself to respond to this letter writer. And it happens to be an athlete who is seeking advice if she wants to continue and pursue her dream while her boyfriend is fighting a terminal illness. So yeah, he decides to reply, only to realize that things are really out of the ordinary, as I just said. I mean, other than the fact that the letter just came straight out of nowhere, they soon quickly realized that the letter actually came from decades before. So the biggest giveaway there was that the athlete mentioned that she was to compete in the 1980 Moscow Olympics, which, if you didn't know, like I had to totally Google this. That was the same year that Japan and several other countries boycotted the Olympics that year. So if you're connecting the dots, I think you would quickly realize that the laws of time and physics don't exactly work as normally as it should in the Namiya General Store. Color me intrigued. I love a good time travel story. No, honestly, because this book is categorized as a magical realism novel, I don't think it has any explanation on why this is happening, and frankly, I don't think it really needed one. Now, I was thinking that the book was only going to focus on the three characters that we meet at the beginning, but I was so surprised that we actually explore the different letter writers, and we even get a background of the owner of the Namiya General Store, Mr. Namiya himself. Now, the background of the store is actually told from the perspective of Mr. Namiya's son. I do wish that they explored this part more, because obviously the story title is called the Miracles of the Namiya General Store, but I felt like it was just so quickly brushed over, and there was just more emphasis on the other letter writers instead. The course of this novel kind of runs like Before the Coffee Gets Cold, if you ever read that very popular book, which I'm sure most of my watchers probably have. Different characters are actually highlighted on different chapters of this book, and I think what I loved the most was how they just seamlessly tied together in the end. Yes, even the three delinquents are actually part of this big miracle. That being said, I really do applaud Keigo Higashino for writing this book. I don't think that this novel was easy to write at all, because number one, he has the challenge of like creating this big cast of characters and trying to connect their stories together. Did that super flawlessly, and I really want to commend him for that. Like, my only quip is that the book sometimes felt slow at some places. I get that this is sort of like a theme in most Japanese novels. They tend to move at a slower pace. Like, if you read Before the Coffee Gets Cold, like, the stories move quite slowly, and it's even reflected in their films, especially like their slice of life movies, think Hayao Miyazaki. So that being said, you might want to skip this one if you want to read or would rather read books that give you like an adrenaline rush. For myself, I don't think I really had much of a problem finishing this book. I did love each story, although I liked some stories more than others, one of which is the one about the musician. That really did touch me, and I really enjoyed the chapters of the Beatles fan. I admit that the part where he was like listening to Yesterday playing in the background felt like an actual movie. The scene was so vividly described. I really loved it. Of course, if this is your first translated book, expect the writing to be more on the simple side. I mean, that's quite common when it comes to translated books, right? I've read a number of novels that were translated from Korean or Japanese to English, so the writing tends to be very simplistic, so don't expect any deep words or quotable quotes. So yes, I really did like this book. I'm hoping to conjure it with my hands because I don't have the physical copy. And if you're looking for a nice novel that you just want to like dive into, I would totally recommend this to all of you. It is just a simple story about fate and miracles and how life is the greatest miracle of that sort. I rated this book 3.7 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It might not be a perfect book, but it was really a nice reprieve after reading Death Valley. So it's basically nighttime and I have to cook dinner now. So for my next video, I will be reviewing Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I already finished that book and I will be writing my script and filming my review. Sorry for the background, the dogs are going nuts. Okay, thank you for watching and thank you for subscribing. I'll see you on my next video. Bye!